I lured the girl into the forest on the outskirts of the city. There's a forest there. And there, after raping her, I killed her. It also played a role that the girl knew me. In the yard where she lived, our friends resided. They also had a daughter, and she sometimes played in the yard with my daughter, so she knew me. But you knew that she knew you? Well, yes. And you still went through with it? Yes. So you knew in advance that you would kill her? Yes, exactly. (1991) Russia. A 9-year-old girl was returning home after walking her dog. She had no idea that an adult man had been watching her walk the entire time. He entered the building, and when the girl opened the door, the man shoved her inside and shut the door behind him. He touched her inappropriately and then ran away. This is how the disgusting story of Oleg Rylkov begins. A maniac who committed crimes against children and took lives with unimaginable cruelty. There were no signs of an unhappy childhood, abuse, or neglect in his background. He served in the army, moved to Tolyatti, and began working as a tinsmith at a factory. Colleagues spoke of him as a nice guy, and in general, he did not arouse the slightest suspicion in those around him. However, already at that time, he led a double life and combined work at the factory with robbing apartments. After the first episode with the girl, Rylkov was haunted by obsessive thoughts about crime. A series of rapes of girls aged 6 to 13 began in the city. Over time, it became an obsession, or how can I put it? Like, you know, like a second inner self emerged, a second I, or whatever you want to call it. The further it went, the more I led a double life. On one hand, family, wife, own child, work, social circle. And on the other hand, already, the second. Some internal brakes were released. Impunity, some sexual fantasies. Well, so did you go for theft and the assault happened, let's say accidentally? Or did you already do it consciously? Yes, later I consciously did it, of course. Then the theft itself was so-so. I was interested in the thrill of all these sensations. Did you stalk the child somewhere? Yes, in the city. Near the school, somewhere else. But it, happened more intuitively. Rylkov was an excellent psychologist and won over children. He tracked down the victim and then, after making sure no adults were home, knocked on the door and, under various pretexts, asked to open it. He told the girls that someone needed to call an ambulance, urgently call on the phone, or that he had found a cat and maybe the girl knew whose it was. Children are very trusting, especially in situations when they are caught off guard. Everyone is taught from childhood not to open the door to strangers, not to talk to strangers on the streets. But can such a kind mustachioed man be a bad person? After the doors opened, Rylkov committed sexual violence and then robbed apartments and left. In August 1993, Oleg Rylkov committed his first murder. He met a woman, they had a drink, and went to the beach at night. He began to insist on intimacy, but the girl refused. Rylkov did not like this. He began to beat her and then strangled her. Approximately at this spot, we stopped, laid out a bag and some items. She resisted, tried to stand up, attempted to escape. I knocked her down, and then struck her directly in the face. I hit her twice. One blow was very strong. About 10 to 15 blows landed directly on her neck, and after that she became quiet. So I took her under the armpits and dragged her about 10 to 12 meters. In 1994, Rylkov noticed that the front door of one of the apartments in the entrance was slightly open. He went inside and found that the owner was sleeping. With a rope prepared in advance, he tied her hands and feet, but at that moment, the woman woke up and began to fight back. Rylkov brutally beat her and stabbed her in the neck, after which the unfortunate woman died. Without hurrying, the criminal found money and valuables in the apartment and, unnoticed by anyone, left the scene of the crime. A few months later, Rylkov noticed a girl on the street with whom he started a conversation. A passing woman noticed the conversation of an adult man with a child and intervened. Rylkov tracked down where this woman lived and, at night, broke into her apartment by breaking a window with a stick. He beat her to death. After this, multiple episodes of attacks and murders occurred. At this time, Rylkov's wife filed for divorce and left him due to the increasing incidents of violence at home. In 1996, Rylkov committed a brutal murder of a 7-year-old boy, Ruslan Tkachev. He easily gained the child's trust and killed him, inflicting more than 20 wounds. Relief, the highest pleasure, one might say. After the first murder, I don't know how to describe it. Something internal was pushing me. The details of this crime are so horrific that we will simply say that the body was dismembered. It was after this crime that Rylkov would be called the Tolyatti Ripper. After this murder, the following happened. Rylkov was detained by the police, but not for his bloody crimes, but for being intoxicated without documents. 3 days later, he was released, and, feeling absolute impunity, Rylkov went hunting again. Later, he called his crimes the highest pleasure. He committed more than 30 rapes, some of which ended in brutal murders, until the murder of the girl who knew him occurred. Her tortured body was found on the territory of a military unit. This time, the girl and the man were seen by witnesses. They made a photo fit, according to which the suspect was identified as Oleg Rylkov. A few days later, a patrol detained Rylkov while he was trying to pay with a counterfeit banknote. He gave the name of his friend, Yashchenko. They took a written undertaking not to leave and released him. Later, the deception was revealed when the real Yashchenko was summoned for questioning by subpoena. He said that his friend was Oleg Rylkov, and it seemed he was going to go to Novokuznetsk. At the same time, children were disappearing in Novokuznetsk. Rylkov became a suspect in the case of the Novokuznetsk Ripper, who was the infamous Alexander Spesivtsev. Unfortunately, the presence of the suspect Rylkov confused the police, and they spent a long time looking for the wrong person, while Spesivtsev continued to kill. At that time, the Novokuznetsk monster had already been confirmed to have more than 20 victims. From that moment on, Oleg Rylkov was on the run. He began to live with a woman who sheltered Rylkov at her dacha, a summer house. They quarreled and he brutally killed her with an axe. I pushed her onto the bed. She fell face down, her knees on the floor. Holding the axe in my right hand, I struck her in the back of the head with the blunt side, hitting her 5 times. He left the woman's body at the dacha and returned to her house. A day later, Rylkov broke into the neighbor's apartment, where an 8-year-old girl and her older brother were. He tied up the children, committed violence against the girl, and then started beating them with a hammer. The boy managed to escape from the apartment and get to the neighbors, who called the police. Rylkov was detained in the apartment of the woman he had killed the day before. At that moment, he was watching an adult film on a stolen VCR. During the trial, his lawyers refused him one by one, and his mother publicly disowned her son. Rylkov was sentenced to death, but eventually he was pardoned and sentenced to life imprisonment. Rylkov was transferred to the Black Dolphin, which is known for its severity towards prisoners, where they serve sentences for the most terrible crimes. But even in such a prison, those convicted of crimes against children are despised. They are representatives of the lowest caste, the lowered. Already serving his sentence, Rylkov began to confess to new episodes. In total, he has 12 people's blood on his account and more than 40 heinous crimes committed against children. Some believe that stories about crimes and criminals are harmful to society and, in particular, to children. However, it is worth thinking about the fact that when a child understands the danger and the reason why it is worth fearing strangers and not trusting strangers, this saves lives.